Number 3. I've been delivering fast food for 6 months now. It's not the best job in the world, but it allows me to save some money to move out from my unsupportive parents' place. And it's easy enough. You pick up a bag, drop it off, and repeat until your shift's over. No real thinking required. Most people don't even answer the door. They just let you leave the food at the front, send a quick thank you text, and you're on your way. But about a month ago, I started noticing something weird during my late night runs. It wasn't anything big at first, just a guy standing across the street whenever I'd park. At first I thought it was just another person out for a walk. There are plenty of those around. But then I realized it was always the same guy, in the same spot, just standing there, watching. I'm not talking once or twice. This was happening every shift, always at different locations. But there he was, across the street, just standing there, staring. He never moved, not toward me, not away. Just stood there. I'd do the delivery, get back in my car, and when I drove off, he'd still be standing in the same place, watching me leave. I didn't want to think too much about it. You see all kinds of weird stuff when you work late nights, and you learn pretty quickly that the less you notice, the better. But after a week of this, it got under my skin. I started looking for him at every stop, expecting him to be somewhere in the scene, and he always was. One night, I was doing a delivery in the suburbs, one of those quiet neighborhoods where the only sound you hear is your own footsteps. It was just past midnight, and I was carrying a bag of burgers and fries to a small house on the corner of Maple and 7. As I got out of my car, I looked across the street, and sure enough, there he was. Same guy, same dark clothes, standing on the sidewalk across from me, staring. I tried to ignore him, walked up to the house and dropped the bag at the door like usual. As I turned around, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. He hadn't moved, but something about him seemed closer. I blinked, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. When I got back in the car, I checked the rearview mirror. He was still standing there, but now his face was clearer under the streetlight. Blood-red crosses were painted on his skin. And those eyes, they were like holes. Hollow, unfocused, but still somehow locked on me, making floods of shame wash over my unconscious. I drove off quickly, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back. My boyfriend and I decided to spend the night together at his, enjoying a rare evening of relaxation. He's been incredibly supportive, especially since I've been working so much and saving up to move out from my parents' place. I've been waiting for the right time to find our own space, where we can be ourselves without hiding or sneaking around. And that night we were talking about my plans, and I mentioned the strange guy who kept appearing. I was hoping sharing it with him would help me process it better. He listened intently and tried to reassure me it was probably just a coincidence or a freak who stayed up in the late hours like me. I felt a little better after talking to him, but the uneasy feeling never quite went away. The next night, the same thing happened, but this time it was worse. I was delivering to an apartment complex on the edge of town. I parked by the entrance, grabbed the bag of chicken nuggets, and as soon as I stepped out, I saw him. Not across the street this time, but on the same sidewalk, standing under a flickering street lamp. He was closer. Too close. I hurried through the delivery, not caring about making sure everything was perfect, and rushed back to my car. I locked the doors the second I got inside. I didn't dare look up until I was driving away. When I did, he was gone. I should have stopped working nights right then and there. But money's tight, and the late night shifts pay better. And let's be real, I need every bit of it. It's not just about keeping my head above water. It's about getting out. Getting away from my parents, their small minds, their small house, their small religious town. I don't talk about it much, but I've been putting every spare penny aside, saving for that perfect moment when I can finally move out for good, get a place of my own. A place where I don't have to hide every part of myself, where I don't have to sneak around or pretend like I'm someone I'm not. When I discuss the man stalking me with my boyfriend, he thinks that the reason I keep the late night shifts is just about money. But it's more than that. It's my freedom. Then, a few nights ago, something happened that I can't explain away. Oh, I was out on my last delivery of the night, in a nice and conservative neighborhood where the streets were mostly empty after dark. It was a giant house with a gate and a long driveway. I parked at the end, grabbed the Indian takeaway, and started walking up to the house. Halfway there, I froze. He was inside the gate, not across the street, not on the sidewalk, but right there, just standing next to a tree at the edge of the property, watching me. My legs felt like they were made of lead, but I forced myself to push past him. I made the delivery, dropped the food on the porch, and practically sprinted back to my car. I didn't even care if the guy was right there. I just wanted to get away to safety. As soon as I got in the car, I locked the doors and stared straight ahead, not daring to look around. My hands were shaking as I put the car in reverse. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my own number. "Don't turn around." I felt the blood drain from my face. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. Another buzz. "He's behind you." I couldn't help it. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing. But when I looked forward again, I nearly screamed. He was standing in front of my car just outside the gate, his lips forming inaudible words, his hands stretched out toward the sky, fingers splayed, palms up as if offering me to something higher, something far beyond my understanding. His face painted with those blood-red crosses, twisted in desperation as if he was pleading for himself or me. His lips moved faster, fervently, but the words wouldn't reach me. His eyes, those hollow eyes, locked onto mine. The realization struck me hard, making my breath catch. He wasn't just standing there. He was performing some sort of ritual, a frantic prayer that turned the space between us into both sacred ground and a fire pit. I don't know how I managed to drive away without crashing. I didn't look back, didn't stop until I was home. I ran inside, locked every door and window, and sat in the dark shaking. The messages haven't stopped, even though I've switched to day shifts only and no longer see him. Every night I get a text from my own number. They're always short and simple, but they all mean the same thing. He's still watching. And earlier today, when I parked outside my parents' house after another long shift, I got one more. "Let me in." I don't know what's going to be the end of this. I don't know how to stop who or what he is. But I do know one thing. If you ever see a man standing across the street from you watching, don't ignore him. And whatever you do, don't let him in. Number 2, I deliver for Marco's Pizza. I had a delivery one night and thought it would be just like any other delivery I've had in the past. I live in Georgia, so I usually deliver to rural areas. I was about to get off in an hour, and I got this delivery to this road that I knew was in a very wooded area. As soon as I get up to the house, the person's driveway was like 1/4 miles long, so I just drive up the driveway and park there. I get the food out of my car, a pen, and the receipt, and start walking towards the front door. As I'm walking to the front door, a middle-aged skinny woman comes out from behind the house and says, "Hey, we're over here in the garage." Now, that was the first red flag. I go to the ladies' garage, but I just stand outside the doorway. I look inside the garage and there are 2 overweight old men sitting in recliner chairs in all camo clothing. I look at the walls and there are at least 5 rebel flags hanging, 6 dead deer heads, and a Trump 2024 poster on the wall. Number 1, one night I was serving a customer and out of nowhere a woman bursts into the store shouting intelligible shit, literally tries to dive over the counter, hits it instead, winding herself, and her can of cider flies forwards and spills all down me. So I'm thinking, great, 20 minutes to closing, and I get the drunk junkie flying at me. She starts screaming that I've got to help her. They're after her. I dismiss it as this woman looked like a junkie, scraggy hair, missing teeth. Not homeless, as she had decent clothing, which made it seem a tad off. So I calm her down, give an apologetic look to the other lady I was serving, who now had placed herself into the farthest opposite corner to the madwoman. She keeps telling the men are coming over and over. By this point, I've gone into reception to get her out of the store, and she's grabbing me, saying I have to phone the police. So I tell her the local police station at quite literally 2 streets away, and she's begging me now to take her. So I get frustrated thinking, man, I gotta get her out the store. As she started understanding I'm not helping her, She gives up trying to convince me and just goes quiet, like instantly quiet. Stares at the floor in horror, like she'd given up on everything. She then slowly walks to the door, turns her head and softly says, "I'm sorry." Proceeds to run out the door and down the street. So I step outside to see where she goes, and she fucking runs into oncoming traffic and stops about 5 cars. A bunch of people are now trying to restrain her on the side of the road, and a guy that came past the shop told me she was running around trying to get people tell her further down the street. Another day, another junkie, I thought. As the police came and collected her, I started making my way back in, and as I turned, I noticed a car outside my store on the other side of a connecting road. All black SUV, and inside 2 guys with suits, sunglasses. This was at 11:45 p.m., and what was clearly a cord coming out of their ears. Now bear in mind this is UK and they were dressed like American TV show feds. They just stared at me until I got back into my store. That night after closing, I arranged for a friend to pick me up as I was a little spooked by their presence, despite my rationale telling me it was too uncanny to mean anything. The guys were still there when I left, and they tailed my friend and I for a good 2 miles before they hit a red and we got through. I've never been so thoroughly spooked by a 10-minute incident. Made me wonder if the woman was a junkie at all.